It is Sunday morning, coming to you from Athens, Greece, around 9:30 in the morning. That would make it 9:30 Kiev time, 10:30 Moscow time, and let's do an update on what's going on with the situation in Ukraine. And as with all my videos, everything I say in this video could change as the day goes on. But in this video, I don't think things will change that much because things seem pretty static, to be quite honest. There's movement going on, and there's negotiations, and there's humanitarian corridors, and the Russian military seems to be encircling more and more cities, reinforcing its position, and also doing various probing and mop-up operations in various cities where they're trying to clear out the Ukraine military and the Azov guys like Mariupol or Kharkiv, cities like this. But things can change as the day goes along. So, let's begin first by putting a bunch of maps on, which show the progress of the Russian military in the 10-11 days since the operation started. And once again, these are Russian maps, but I've cross-checked them with a lot of maps which are, say, anti-Russian and pro-Russian and in the middle, and I think this map is a pretty accurate picture as to what's happening. This map is on day 10, day 9, 10, so obviously things might have changed slightly, maybe not, who knows. But I think this is the most recent map and gives you the most recent picture as to the situation on the ground in Ukraine, the military situation. And as you saw the various maps that I put up, you can see the progress that has been made. Various reports that I'm getting, once again, from Russian media or for Russian-friendly media, says that in the 10-11 days since this started, you're looking at about 40% of Ukrainian land that has now been secured and under Russian control. And you're looking at around 75% of the Ukraine military capability has been neutralized. I guess you would call, if you look at the operations goals, the demilitarization and the denazification, then you would say that the demilitarization is about 75% complete. Once again, this is more from Russian sources. So, even if you go to say the Collective West media sources and you taper that down, say to 50% of the Ukraine military capacity has been neutralized. Okay, it's significant, even if you go by that metric. And even if you look at the maps and you say, okay, well, I doubt that Russia has taken 40% of the territory in Ukraine, or at least has secured 40% of the territory in Ukraine, and say you go back to the first map, well, you're still looking at maybe 25%. But interestingly enough, on a side note, all the maps that I was looking for as I was creating this, as I was researching for this video, I always end up going to this map because they seem to have the most reliable and the most objective, even though it is a Russian source. But I couldn't find any map on day 10. Every map that I saw in the Collective West was just giving a picture of day like 2 or 3 or 4. They didn't have an accurate update of day 10 or 11. They just kind of left it at how the situation was a week ago. Make of that what you will. I think that kind of points to the fact that maybe they don't want to show the progress because it goes against the narrative. That would be how I would look at it. But let me know in the comments down below how you see it. Anyway, I think these maps are the most accurate, and they paint an approximate picture as to the progress made. And anyone that can look at the map, you don't have to be a military expert, you can see where this is going. I've pointed many times to the fact that you have multiple cauldrons, encirclements going on, around four cauldrons if you look at it right now. You can see 4 cauldrons, one big cauldron, another cauldron that's going to that's focused on a fighting force of around 60,000 in the east of Ukraine, which is encircled. And then you have the Mariupol, Odessa cauldrons forming. Anyway, I've talked about the military situation. That's just an update as to the progress of the military situation. Now, a couple more stories I want to talk about. Vladimir Putin spoke yesterday. He was at a meeting, an event with female like Air Force and flight personnel, trainees, I think it was. But anyway, he made a statement saying that a no-fly zone would be regarded as an act of war and that Russia would take action against the country that were to impose a no-fly zone. So I think it's safe to say that we should take Putin's red lines seriously. So when he says any country that dares to impose a no-fly zone, which would be the United States, what other country can impose a no-fly zone? NATO, the United States. But NATO is the U.S., so, any country that puts a no-fly zone in place or tries to enforce a no-fly zone, it'll be seen as an act of war. The Western mainstream media always talks about, well, if we put a no-fly zone, that means we have to, shoot down Russian fighter jets, and we have to engage with the Russian military in the air, and we have to take out Russian installations. No one talks about the fact that Russia's going to also respond, and they're going to take out military installations in Europe. They're going to take out military installations in NATO. They're going to take out military bases in NATO, and they're going to shoot down American pilots. I mean, the U.S. has a massive advantage in the air. There's no doubt about that. But you are working in an offensive manner, and you're going towards Russia. Russia is going to be defending in this situation, and you're playing on their turf. So, I like to see the CNN and the MSNBC pundits always talk about, but if we engage with Russia, we're going to shoot down their planes and we're going to take out their military installations. No one ever talks about the fact that, well, Russia's going to do the same. They're going to retaliate in the same manner. And where do you think the air bases and the military installations and the retaliation will be? On many of the countries in and around Russia, which are NATO members. So a no-fly zone would be a World War III, and all these videos would stop, and none of this engagement that we have right now would have any meaning or any purpose, because that would be the end. Most likely, that would be the end. I don't see how you can keep that scale of a conventional war purely conventional and not go nuclear. Anyway, those were the statements from Putin. My impression of Putin when he was speaking, once again, he seemed very calm. I mean, he seemed like everything was under control. And he said that the military operation is going exactly as planned. The generals in the collective West and a lot of the media and a lot of independent pundits are trying to say this is going badly because Russia didn't take over the country in 3 days. That's ridiculous. No one knows Russia's timeline. Even I was off. I said that Russia's timeline was going to be March 2nd because that was a date that Russia put into place where they would open up the airspace for their cities in and around Ukraine, like Rostov, for example. They closed the airspace in the city of Rostov, which is one of the closest cities to the east of Ukraine, and they said it would reopen on March 2nd. So I thought, okay, this military operation will last until March 2nd, and that was wrong. And, trying to figure out what Russia's timeline is in this operation is, who knows? So everyone that's saying, well, they didn't take Kiev in 3 days and all this stuff is ridiculous. No one freaking knows what their timeline is. All we know is that they're sticking to their purpose, their goal, their stated goal of demilitarization and denazification. That is what they're saying is their goal, and they're sticking to that line. That's what we know. That is really all we know. And we know that they've made a hell of a lot of progress in Ukraine, given the size of the freaking country. I mean, you're talking about a country that's the size of what, Texas? I mean, I think 3-4 days is kind of ridiculous to expect that. So that's the situation with the military operations. That's what Putin said during his event. And it's interesting. Putin's, he seems to be just going about his business. He's doing these events. He's making statements. He's not in hiding, or he's not, he doesn't seem belligerent or upset or shaky. Zelensky, on the other hand, well, the videos that have been coming out about him are just, the guy looks like he's a wreck. Now, you could say he's a wreck because of the massive pressure that he's undergoing, given the fact that his city is surrounded and his government is falling apart and his military appears to be losing. Once again, looking at the maps and the information that we have at our disposal, that's what it looks like. So, he looks like he's a mess from that standpoint, and he's just under a lot of pressure. Yes, there's also a lot of analysis going around that Zelensky's a mess because, he's kind of almost a hostage in a way, in that these far right elements that were in his government, and they were in the government before Zelensky, just so we don't get into that, well, how could Zelensky be, surrounded by NAZIs? Well, these guys are deeply entrenched in the Ukraine system in general. They're a small group of people. They have a large military with the Azov battalion, but yeah, it's a small, faction in Ukraine, but it's very, very powerful, and they're entrenched in all kinds of, in all the apparati of the Ukraine government. They're in there, and they're also in and around Zelensky as well. And so there's a lot of people saying that Zelensky is not being allowed to leave. He's not being allowed to evacuate. He's not being allowed to surrender because these Azov guys are holding him hostage. I don't know. The guy looked like he was a complete mess. He looked like, in his latest press conferences, he looked like he was drunk or on drugs, he looked like he was a freaking wreck. So I don't know what's going on there. No one knows what's going on there. Everyone has their hunches and their suspicions, but once again, we don't know. There is a Washington Post story which is saying that the Pentagon is now actively planning to evacuate Zelensky and his team in order to create a government in exile. Zelensky's going to become some sort of, Juan Guaido figure, right? I'm not making exact comparisons between Zelensky and Juan Guaido. You have two very different situations between Venezuela and what's going on in Ukraine, but government in exile, and Zelensky will be recognized by the collective West as the legitimate president and government, and he'll have a house in Miami, and he'll be living it up and going to all the great parties and all of these things in the West, and that'll be Zelensky's life going forward. That's the latest report from the Washington Post, and they're saying that they've got reliable sources in the Pentagon that are now starting to plan his evacuation. Once again, this is Washington Post reporting, so who knows? There's no doubt that the Russians have surrounded Kiev, and they want to keep the Zelensky team intact because for them, that's the team that can negotiate a settlement. That's who they see as the government that can negotiate a settlement, the regime that they can work with to end this. So, I think that's why the Russians are just staying put in and around Kiev, and you're going to see a lot of diplomacy and 5-6 hour ceasefires, 5-6 hour humanitarian corridors, spurts of diplomacy, and you're going to see this go on, I believe, for the next week. And this is exactly what was happening in Syria. These short spurts of diplomacy and ceasefires and humanitarian corridors, then the fighting resumes, then you have these ceasefires again, and then it just keeps on going on and on. But what the Russians are doing is they're hammering away with the diplomacy angle. They're hammering away there, and then they're also hammering away from the military side of things. So once again, those two things are working hand in hand in order for them to achieve the goal that they want. So the final thing I want to talk about are the sanctions and big tech, actually, and the fact that Visa and Mastercard are pulling out of Russia. So the interesting thing is that inside of Russia, Sberbank came out with an announcement. Sberbank is the big Russian state bank. It's huge. They came out with an announcement, and they said that all of the Sberbank cards, i.e. the debit cards, which have the Visa or the Mastercard, say, insignia logo there, they're going to work fine inside of Russia going forward. So those are fine. It's just when you try to use the card, say, outside of Russia, then it's not going to work. Or say I go into Russia and I decide to use my Greek Visa debit or my Greek credit card, right? That's not going to work. So that's the situation there. So Visa, MasterCard are out. Inside of Russia, people will still be able to use their debit cards, buying stuff like normal. And Sberbank said that Russians need to now migrate to the Mir card, The Mir card is their own Visa Mastercard service, and it's used all over the Russian world, the Ruski Mir, as they call it. So it's used all over the Russian world. It's also used in Cyprus, to be honest, because we have, a lot of Russian tourists. There's a lot of establishments in Cyprus that use the Mir card. And so that's going to be used, and they're going to also use the Chinese card as well. I think it's called the I believe it's UniCredit, if I'm not mistaken, which is the Chinese Visa Mastercard system. So that's also going to be used. So that's the situation there. We had news that Russia is kicking out, CNN, BBC, all these media companies. They say they're leaving on their own fruition. They're kind of leaving because Russia passed a law which pretty much said either you have to play by the state's rule. Vladimir Putin signed this into law. He said you either have to play by the state's rule, you have to either leave entirely, just get out, or you have to forfeit your assets and your business to local authorities or to local businesses. So he signed that into law, and the minute he signed that into law, obviously all the Western news outlets they left, and that's going to get taken over by Russian media outlets. Putin also limited the capabilities of various independent news outlets that are, let's call it anti-Russian, for lack of a better word, that are very Western aligned. And there's a very active, I would say a majority active liberal media that is against the Kremlin. A very, very big contingent of media outlets and publications are anti-Kremlin, and they were operating freely up until now, and so he's putting a stop to that. He also banned Twitter and Facebook, and they're gone. Facebook is definitely gone. The last I heard is Twitter has been marginalized. It's you probably type in Twitter in Russia, and it probably takes 10 minutes to load. So those are gone as well. Of course, we know who fired the first shot in this sanctions, canceling war that has been taking place. We know that was the collective West, and Twitter started to take action against Russia, and Facebook took action against Russia, and all the businesses and the media, they started canceling RT and Sputnik and Russian media from the West. And so this has just escalated to the point where now you're starting to see some retaliation from the Kremlin. And so they got rid of Facebook, they pretty much got rid of Twitter. All of big tech, I think, is going to be gone, and they got rid of all the mainstream media outlets. All the independent liberal anti-Kremlin media outlets are pretty much gone now. I'm sure all the NGOs and all of them are going to be gone. So it's going to be really hard. If the West was thinking they're going to create some sort of regime change in Russia, well, it's going to be really hard when the tools that you use to affect regime change, i.e. big tech, social media, Facebook, these NGOs, these liberal media publications, now that they're all gone, it's going to be very hard to create some sort of regime change dynamic. So, it's probably a good thing for any country too. And I believe in free speech. I believe CNN and all these things should be active wherever they want, and vice versa. But I'm kind of being a little, I'm joking around here by saying it's kind of a blessing in disguise to not have CNN and Facebook in your country. But I'm just saying that as kind of a joke. I think everyone knows what I mean there. But isn't it interesting? And I'll leave you with this thought. Isn't it interesting that during the trucker convoy, Facebook was banning any posts and anybody that was speaking the truth about the Freedom Convoy in Canada, right? They had a policy to delete posts, to delete accounts, to prevent people getting together, to mobilize, to communicate. Facebook did everything to suppress the Canadian Freedom Convoy. But with Russia, last week, Nick Clegg, who's people in the UK will know about Nick Clegg. Was a political figure, a powerful political figure in the UK. Now he's like communications director at Facebook. Funny how that works. But Nick Clegg came out with a statement a week ago, and he said, we want people in Russia to use Facebook to organize protests. And he was hinting at to organize protests and, overthrow the government. That was what he was hinting at. He didn't say overthrow the government, but we all know what he was getting at. And so that was Nick Clegg's statement. So it's interesting how Facebook in Canada is used to suppress protests and free speech, and they actively work to suppress that in order to help the Trudeau-Christoforou regime, and I always call it the Trudeau-Freeland regime, and that's how we should look at the government in Canada going forward. But when it comes to Russia, they actively are encouraging the Russian people to get out and protest and to create protest events, and to mobilize. Isn't it funny how that works? Anyway, I just wanted to leave you that thought. Oh, and on the sanctions and the fact that you have a lot of like clothing stores and Nikes and all these shops are leaving Russia, H&M and whatever, LVMH, I think is the fashion brand. Anyway, they're all leaving Russia. It's meaningless. With the law that Putin signed into place, those companies are going to give their entire business over to local authorities, local manufacturers, local businesses. They're going to take the shops. They're going to take all the inventory. They're going to take everything, right? They're going to have the sales force in place, and they're just going to take it over. And all they're going to do is they're going to go to the shops in China or Vietnam or Turkey, and they're going to say, you know what? You're making these Nikes here? Well, slap this logo on these Nikes, and now we're going to brand it whatever they're going to call it. And, that's going to be replaced literally in 3 months. It's going to be hard in Russia for 6 months. It's going to be miserable. But on the consumer end of things, all that stuff's going to be completely swapped out and replaced, in the snap of a finger. It's going to be really, really easy for them because all the infrastructure is going to stay in place, all the buildings, all the points of sale, all the people, everything's going to stay in place, and all they're going to do is just tell the manufacturer to put a different emblem, a different insignia, a different logo on there, and that'll be that. So that's what's going to happen there. What a time if you're an entrepreneur and you're in Russia. What a time. I mean, you could create an Airbnb clone. You can buy a clone for $1,000, which gives you everything that Airbnb, all the features of Airbnb, and just launch it for the Russian-speaking world. You're talking about 350 million Russian speakers. Plus, you can target China and Vietnam and Turkey, and you can create a Booking.com because Booking.com also left Russia. You can create a Booking.com clone. I mean, all these things may also exist, and you can, do that as well. I mean, if you're a Russian entrepreneur, wow, what a time to be there. What a time to create incredible opportunities and incredible wealth. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia gets, completely scraps copyright, trademark, international copyright, trademark, patent laws. I wouldn't be surprised if they're done with that as well. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're in Russia or you can get to Russia, wow, what an opportunity is ahead of you. I mean, an Airbnb clone, a Booking.com clone, social media, clothing shops, all that stuff is going to be in place. All you have to do is just create a brand, swap things out, and you're pretty much good to go. And you have a huge, huge market. Like I said, you're looking at just 350 million Russian speakers. It's pretty big. It's a pretty big market, and you don't have the foreign competition as well. So not only do you have this market, you don't have to, if you're going to make shoes, like athletic shoes, you have this market there, and you don't have to worry about Nike or Adidas because they're out. So you don't have that competition either. I mean, incredible opportunities just in Greek, we have a saying, for each door that closes, another opens. And the Greeks really believe in that saying. So when things go bad and you feel like the doors are closing in on you, we always say when one door closes, which is say something bad happens to you or in your business, in your life, we always say another door opens. And that's what you're going to see in 6 months. And tourist opportunities. I'll leave you on this note. Turkey, from what I understand, Turkey hasn't closed anything down yet, airspace with Russia either. Boy, are they going to benefit from the Russian tourism this summer. Bigly. I mean, in a big way. They're going to benefit from the tourism that's going to come in the summer. Cyprus is 45% oriented towards Russian tourists. 45% of the tourist market is oriented in Cyprus towards Russia. Turkey has a huge Russian tourist market. You know, they are also very oriented towards Russian tourism. They're going to benefit in a big way. Cyprus is going to get slammed. Keep in mind, you know, when you're talking about stuff like tourism, Greece as well, Greece, Italy, Spain, I mean, they're just going to get slammed. When you're talking about the tourist market, you're just not talking about planes flying in. You know what I mean? You're not talking about, oh, okay, well, you know, we'll just swap out Russians for, you know, travelers from the UK or something like that. Or travelers from Germany. Germany is a good example, say. So we'll swap out Russia for Germany. Well, first of all, you're talking about a country of 150 million in Russia, but you're also talking about the local tourist infrastructure. In other words, you know, in Cyprus, you go to a city like, say, Limassol, which is very oriented towards the Russian tourist. You're talking about all the menus are in English, Greek, and Russian. You know, you have staff there that has either learned Russian, you know, you've invested in them to learn Russian, or they're you know, Russian diaspora, say they're Russians who are living in Cyprus, who are now working at your restaurant or at your hotel reception. You know, everything has been geared towards the Russian market. All the investment of the city, the events, the bars, the pubs, the restaurants, the menus, the staff, it's all been geared and focused on accommodating the Russian tourist. You know, in Limassol, you have, you know, events where you have like a Russian cultural day. You know, it's timed for, you know, when all the Russians are there and they're holidaying. So, you know, they have, it's in a park and they have food and events and music. You see what I mean? A lot of investment has taken place. Europe is just going to get completely demolished from this, completely demolished. On an economic level, it's going to be very ugly. You know, this whole thing is just god-awful. It is god-awful that we had to come to this point. All because they just couldn't put in writing that Ukraine would be neutral. They just couldn't put it in the Constitution. It was in the Constitution that Ukraine would pursue NATO entry. They just couldn't swap that out and say Ukraine's going to be neutral, and that would have been that. It's terrible. Anyway, we've talked about the reasons for that as well in previous videos, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about why they just couldn't put it in writing. But I'll leave it there, everybody. It's kind of turned out to be a long update, but I don't think there's going to be much change happening today. Many things happening today, but, you know, whenever I say that, all kinds of stuff happens then. So anyway, theduran.locals.com. Check out Alexander's channel. Check out the Duran live streams that we've been doing and the reporting we've been doing on the Duran as well. Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Super U. And the Duran shop, 10% off when you use the code REALNEWS. Take care.